Hey, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And you'll see a third person on our screen, and that is former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and fellow Montanan.
Good to be here with you guys. Where are you guys now physically? Are you in Montana or somewhere else?
I'm in north central Montana, anxiously awaiting Brawl of the Wild 2 this weekend, and I assume you're going to come up to the game, right?
I'll just miss the game. I get to Bozeman on Sunday, I think. So
yeah,
cool.
I was going to ask if you were. I was going to ask if you were going to maybe amend your travel plans to hit that game.
We thought about it, but we have some things I have to do here at Stanford. I run a big institution here at Stanford. It's called the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies. And this week is actually my last week in this job after 11 years.
Really?
So
that's some news.
Finish up that job before I can fly to Montana. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's some big news. So then what, Ambassador?
Well, I'll still be a professor here at Stanford. I'm not going anywhere. Just This is an administrative job. I signed up for 5 years. I then renewed for another 5, so 10. Then did an extra year so they could find a new director. And that's enough. I mean, we've had a great run. I love the institution. We have a lot of great people. I'll connect you with some for future talks about the world. We have some of the best experts on international politics all over the world. But it's time for me to start a new chapter.
Well, congratulations.
It's good. I mean, look, you kind of done your time, but you're also a very, very important person to have in the conversation. Do we want to start with the conversation here, Maritza?
Let me just say, I mean, so you talk about running the Spogli Institute. I mean, I don't know how you do everything, because you've written this book that's not a small book, Autocrats versus Democrats, China, Russia, America, and the New Global Disorder, with the Oxford comma, I have to point out, and which I am a fan of. But also, I mean, this isn't your first book. You've written so many books. You are constantly on TV helping us understand the conflict in Russia and so, or in Ukraine, I'm sorry. And so I don't know how you do it all, but I do want to talk about the book, but I also want to ask you kind of just about the latest headlines with Ukraine and Russia, if we could for a moment.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Are you okay with that, Senator? Do I have your blessing?
I'm good. I'm good to go. Anytime you can have Michael McFaul on one of our podcasts, the IQ level goes way up.
Way up. Yeah. Way up. Yeah. It has nothing to do with us. So yes, we want to get into this book, and normally we go through a whole bunch of headlines before we bring our guests in, but we want to get right into this because we are seeing action right now, potentially, with the potential peace deal in Ukraine. So the latest this morning is that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is saying there may be a new deal presented to Russia within days here. U.S. officials say that Russia is open to Ukraine joining the European Union, not NATO. But it seems this issue of territory is not going away. So I'm wondering your just current takeaway about where these peace talks stand, and if you think we're actually going to see something happen.
Yeah. So first, before I say about the TikTok over the last 24 hours, I do want to say that I think strategically the Trump administration handled this poorly, in that I applaud them that they're engaging. I think that was the right thing to do. The president should get credit for that. You have to talk to the Russians. That was a controversial decision he made. I also applaud that. But after that, they have not put any pressure on Putin. All the pressure's been on the Ukrainians. And I just think in retrospect, when historians write about this, they'll be puzzled by it. Like, that's not usually how mediation happens, where you just tell one side to capitulate and you ask the other side, what do they want for Christmas? And that's been their strategy up to this point. And I just think it was wrong. I think had they given the Ukrainians more weapons, did more sanctions, that would have created better conditions for a better outcome. But that's for the historians to judge. For today, there has been progress. It's real progress. I see President Zelensky acquiescing, giving in to things he doesn't want to give into. You just mentioned one of them, the NATO piece. They want now a security guarantee from the West, and it seems like they have gotten something that is acceptable to the Ukrainians. We don't know the details yet, but it sounds like we and our European allies will help defend Ukraine if they're attacked by Russia. I'm a little worried that the Trump administration won't actually agree to do that if that ever happened. But I can tell by the way the Ukrainians are talking about it, they feel like they've made progress on that piece. So the last big piece is about territory, and it's about this region called Donbass. Putin tried to seize Donbass back in 2014. A lot of people forget that. They think the war started in 2022. And no, it started in 2014. He supported these separatists in Donbass. He sent in his military and his intelligence officers. He gave them arms. It didn't succeed. And so then he launched his full-scale invasion in 2022. And we're now 3.5 years in, almost 4 years in, and they still haven't conquered all of Donbass. So Putin's position right now is give us the rest of Donbass. And he's asking President Trump to tell Zelensky to do that. And Zelensky's saying, I can't do that. I know he doesn't want to do that, but I think it's important to remember he's the democratically elected president of Ukraine, not the autocrat like Putin is. And so even if he said yes, I don't think the Ukrainian people would support that. I mean, this is territory held by Ukrainian soldiers. They fought for 3.5 years to hold it, and now they're supposed to give it up after fighting. I just think that's a bridge too far. And so that, I think they're going to take that to Putin and say, will you now just accept the end of the war where the front line is today? And that's the piece we don't know what his answer will be yet.
So this deal, and this may be an unfair question for you, Ambassador, but this deal was this peace deal that they're talking about now one designed by Zelensky or one designed by Putin with Zelensky's input? Because it was apparent the first one was kind of done between Trump and Putin, and maybe just Putin.
Yes.
Was this one done by the EU and Zelensky, or was the United States a part of this, or do you know?
Well, you're right about it's changed over time. So the first one that dropped, by all accounts that I trust, was written by the Russians and handed over to Special Envoy Witkoff. And it was just everything that Putin's wanted since 2022. Nothing had changed. Nothing. By the way, people that are better at this than I am even say the syntax of that document was Russian syntax. Ожидается что? I'm showing off my Russian there. It is expected that. And those kind of phrases are all through there, right? And that's just back to my point about just not very effective negotiating strategy, just listening to what one side wants and then presenting it to the other. Thankfully, the Europeans have gotten involved. And thankfully, this new document has been changed. And I give our European allies a lot of credit that they leaned into that. Again, I just want to lament that we should be leaning into that as the leader of the free world, but it is what it is. And this is the moment we're in. So this now is different. This is, especially on the security guarantee piece. And again, I want to emphasize, I haven't seen the details of that. They haven't been released yet. But it sounds like that piece, we finally have something that the Ukrainians can feel satisfied that they've gotten something in return for giving up the territory that the Russians currently occupy.
Interesting. We're gonna get to the book right now. And first of all, how long did it take you to write this bad boy? I mean, it's pretty healthy.
Thick.
Took me many, many years because I have other responsibilities here at Stanford. I have a portfolio of things I do. So it took a lot of mornings getting up to work for a few hours before we're going to work. And I think, I've written 9 books and edited another half a dozen. Pretty sure this is my last one. Just too big, too long, too hard. There are other ways to communicate, including like what we're doing right now, that I think are more efficient. And I don't expect a lot of people to buy this book. Well, let me put that a different way. I hope lots of people buy this book. I don't expect them all to read this book, but I'm using this book, just so you know, to go out on the road. I think I've given 15 or 20 talks now. My next one, by the way, is in Montana on Monday at the library in Bozeman, Montana. And I've been all over the country, mostly red states, by the way. And I can summarize this book in 39 minutes. And
I heard you have a really good slide deck that kind of walks all of us through this.
I do. I have a great slide deck, and I'll send it to you after our chat, and you can post it where I can just summarize the arguments. But the main argument is about why we're in a challenging moment with regard to the autocratic Russians and autocratic Chinese. It's not Cold War 2.0. I disagree with that analysis, but it is a new era of great power competition that if we're going to win, we have to do things differently. And, you know, I wrote 99% of this book before President Trump was reelected. But since he was reelected, my policy prescriptions are almost antithetical to everything he's doing. And, you know, to summarize it briefly, you know, he's basically a pull home and focus more inside, isolationist. I think our best way to advance our interests is through engagement, not through withdrawal. Second, when he does use power, he likes to do it in a unilateral way, right? So bombing Iran as he did, and now bombing these ships in the Caribbean in a unilateral way. I think America's interests are better served by doing it in cooperation with allies, in continuity and interaction with multilateral organizations. And then third, you know, Trump, my book's called Autocrats versus Democrats, because I do think there's a difference between democratic societies and autocratic societies. I think democracy is a better system of government than dictatorship. President Trump doesn't think in those terms at all. And if you read his national security strategy, just came out a few days ago, it's clear that he doesn't care about supporting democratic ideas or democratic movements around the world. And I think if you look at American history, we've been best served, both our interests regarding security and prosperity, but also our values when we support small d Democrats around the world. So in many ways, if you're looking for an alternative to the Trump doctrine, that's what my book is.
Would you say that our strength since World War II, a vast majority of it has come from our relationships with our allies and our strength through allies?
Absolutely. When I go through the mistakes we made in the book, and I do this in the talk too, I have a whole slide. We made a lot of mistakes in the Cold War. People forget that, by the way. I think that's really important to remember. Reminds me of you know, when I used to coach third grade basketball in Moscow as the U.S. ambassador. My son was the star of the team. It's kind of easy to be a star of a team when you go from a country where everybody plays basketball in third grade to a country where everybody plays hockey. That's not fair to my son. Look, he's a great basketball player to this day. But he was a star. So our play was pass the ball to Luke and everybody get out of the way. That was our offense. And if he played the whole game, we usually won. If he got 3 fouls in the second quarter and he had to sit down and we won still, everybody forgot about those 3 fouls in the second quarter. But if we lost, then everybody said, oh, Luke, why did you get that third foul in the second quarter and had to sit down? We're forgetting about some big mistakes we made during the Cold War. I'll come back to that in a minute. But on the success side, Senator, at the top of my list is allies. At the end of the day, during the Cold War, we had better, stronger, more reliable allies than the Soviets in Asia, in Europe. And today, when I look at the comparison of power of China and Russia and their autocratic friends, North Korea and Iran, and then I look at the blue team, right? The, you know, red team versus blue team. And I look at our allies and I add up, you know, what they spend on defense. We're way more powerful as long as we are united. That's something President Trump is screwing up. Same on the economic dimension. 9 of the 10 largest economies in the world are democracies. And so as long as we're with our allies, I think we're going to be just fine with respect to the Chinese and the Russians and their allies. The question is, will Trump screw that up? I mean, he's threatening to invade Greenland, right? That's an ally. Denmark is an ally of ours. He threatens, that he wants to make Canada the 51st state.
51st state.
And you all, I was born in Glasgow, Montana, pretty close to that Canadian border. I got a lot of Canadian friends. They don't think that's a joke. Some of these Trump people, they tell me, Mike, don't just mellow out. He's just being funny.
No.
Don't find that to be a joke. And I just think this, in many ways, is the core thing that we need to preserve so that in the post-Trump era, we still have our allies to help us manage our security vis-a-vis China and Russia.
I would say, Mike, and I do not have the pedigree that you have from a world standpoint, and ambassador to Russia and all the things you've done internationally. But that is not a joke. What he's talking about, Greenland and Canada, is not a joke. And for those people that say, don't worry about it, just look what he's done.
Yeah.
Because all those things in the first term, they said, well, that's just a joke. He's just kidding. He's implemented it.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And man, oh man, I'll tell you what, if people don't start taking the president and what he says is serious information that comes out of his mouth, and he did it again yesterday, by the way, the information that he talked about with Rob Reiner is incredibly disturbing if you're a human being. I'll just tell you that. If you value civilization, what he said yesterday was absolutely very disturbing. And so when he talks about going into Greenland or Canada, from my perspective, and I live pretty much straight west of Glasgow, and I've got a lot of friends up there too, and we've got a lot of Canadian folks that watch this podcast. Damn right, we better take it. We better take it seriously.
Take it seriously. Yeah, I just think, here now you're the expert, not me, when it comes to American politics, but I did see some people saying, I can't believe the president said that about Rob Reiner and his wife. And I look at that and I say, you can't believe it. He says these kinds of things every day. This is who he is. This is not extraordinary. And I didn't know Rob Reiner that well, but I knew him a little bit because he cared a lot about Ukraine. And we used to interact about that. And you can disagree with people without, respecting their values and the positions. And I just find it embarrassing that we have a president that says things like he said yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, you talk a lot. First of all, if there are any, I don't know if we have any high school students watching or college students. I hope we do. But if you are in because of some research papers, let me just mention that Michael McFaul's notes and citations are 60 pages long in this book. In case you're wondering if he did his research, the answer is yes. But you're right.
How hard I had to fight with my editors to preserve that?
It's important.
A footnote to the footnotes. First of all, the original draft of the book was 1,200 pages long and 6,000 footnotes. A lot of books, publishers don't like footnotes, right? Because that immediately makes these books academic. And I convinced my editor, we're playing for the long game here. Mm-hmm. This book is intended actually for college students and high school kids for decades to come, because this debate's going to be with us for a long time. But I knew in doing that I was going to lose some some readers.
I think it's
that trade.
I think it's fabulous. But I mean, let's just stay on the president for a moment, and then we'll get more into the substance of this book. But when we talk about, you talk about how delicate these issues are, and you talk about Goldilocks solutions a lot. Here's the problem with Goldilocks. The problem with Goldilocks is that it depends on everything needing to be just right. Yes. And when you have the president going off on tangents that are unpredictable, or other leaders in this world, they're not really careful about doing things just right. So that kind of throws a wrench in Goldilocks solutions. So what's the answer?
Well, that's a great point. And I use that word Goldilocks solutions many times, right? Moderate, we're in an era where everything is about the extremes. And I don't think, for what I do, that works effectively for American national interests. I want to keep coming back to that. My book is written first to understand the world and explain the world, and then to provide a kind of grand strategy for how we engage in it. And I think the extremes in the past have not served us well. And I think today, the center, and again, on the domestic politics, I think the same. I'm not an expert on that, but most certainly on foreign policy, I believe that. To your point, I fully acknowledge, and I think I even say it from time to time at the end. Remember, I wrote 99% of this book before our last election. And I did have this debate with the editor. I said, well, maybe I need to change a lot of things that I believe in to be accommodating so that it'll be more palatable for the Trump administration. And I deliberately chose not to do that because I don't, first of all, I don't think they're going to read this book. I know the president's not going to read this book. I'm not sure I have any, sway, with one or two exceptions with this current group. This is a book for the post-Trump era, and I fully acknowledge that. But I think your point is a really good one and should be instructive to people thinking about being in the government in the post-Trump era. That extremism is what will be hard for us to advance our interests in the world. Polarization, I have a big chunk on polarization. Polarization at home means we're fighting each other at home and we're not focused on the Chinese and the Russians. That's exactly what Xi Jinping wants. That's exactly what Putin wants. I watch the news, during the previous election. And January 6th. And, they were thrilled by those events, those images, I
You mean the Russian news?
Sorry? The Russian,
news,
yeah, thank you. The Russian and Chinese news. They were thrilled to death by that because if we're doing literal battle on the Capitol Hill, and we're not focusing on them, that makes them stronger. That makes us weaker.
So it's an interesting time in the country because you talked about a post-Trump era. We had you on this podcast, about 6 months ago? And we probably asked you the same question then. As you think, we're a year into this administration almost. Where do you see us in 3 years? I remember one of your statements was, we've been around for 250 years. We got a pretty good chance of being able to live through these 4 years. I don't think you thought then. I certainly didn't think then things were going to happen, but they've happened.
Yeah.
Where do you think we are in 3 years? As far as democracy, as far as autocrats versus Democrats?
Well, I'm really interested in your answer to that question about internally here domestically, because you know way more than I do about that.
I'm not sure.
We talk about the foreign policy though. So I'm worried. You're right. Things are moving faster. They're breaking things faster than I expected the last time we talked. I want to admit that. And I do believe that if we can endure and preserve some essential minimalist institutions and relationships in the next 3 years, there's a chance for renewal. So let's just focus on NATO. NATO is the one institution I'm worried the most about right now. Thankfully, the president has not announced his plans to withdraw from NATO. And partly he's not doing that because he knows, if he's looked at the same opinion polls I have, that the American people don't support that. And Senator, you can tell us about your colleagues still in the Senate. My assessment is most senators would not support that. And that's a good sign about our democracy still working, checking the worst instincts when it comes to foreign policy. But they're trying as hard as they can to do all but withdraw, right? Talking about pulling out soldiers, talking about repivoting, back to the Western Hemisphere. And let's just be clear about that. Of course, the United States has interests in the Western Hemisphere that we need to defend. But when I worked for the Obama administration, we just took that for granted. That's like saying you're going to defend your own house. Of course, you're going to defend. That was just self-evident. And that they've reverted to that as being their only aspiration, that's a huge sign of withdrawal, of pulling back. It reminds me a lot of the Nixon era, by the way. I did a lot of, I used to know that the Cold War well. I wrote my PhD about the Cold War, but I reread a lot of that history for this book. And that's what Nixon was trying to do. He was pulling back, saying we couldn't stop these communist countries. We had to let our allies do these things on our own. And I just want to remind everybody watching, if you go back and you read, there's a lot of fatalism in America in the late 60s and early 70s. And the cancer that is communism is just going to take over everywhere because they had a lot of momentum, right? Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Angola, Mozambique, Nicaragua. And we look pretty divided at home, punctuated by the resignation of our president. 20 years later, the Soviet Union collapses, and we're the world's only superpower, and democracy is the only game in town. So people that are saying those same fatalistic things today, I would just remind them, they may be right. I don't know. We're political scientists. We're not very good at predicting the future. By the way, neither is the CIA. I worked 5 years in the government. We got a lot of things wrong when I was there. But I just think it's way too early to just say we're on this trajectory forever. And the second thing that gives me, some comfort is that the president is not very popular anymore. His ideas about embracing Putin, only like 19% of Americans agree with him on that. And that, I think, and then now I'm going to hand the baton to you. I think, or both of you for that matter, both of you know way more about America than I do. Does that give an opportunity for constraining these worst elements of executive power, especially in the upcoming, elections that we'll have next year?
So first of all, never assume that we know more than you do or any other guest.
Never.
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 Secondly, I will tell you, there's one thing that totally makes me wonder what the hell is going on in this country, and that is the fact that Congress has totally went AWOL. They've totally. They're not doing their job. They don't care to do their job. If you watch the morning shows, one of the senators got on the Sunday show and say, "Hey, look, I got elected because President Trump cleared the field," and basically went on to say, "I'm going to do anything he wants me to do." Well, what the hell are you in the Senate for is my question. Well,
wow.
If your constituents aren't what you're there for, you need to get the hell out. And if you're there to support Washington, D.C. bosses, you need to get the hell out. That's what they accused me of doing in the last election, by the way, which was bullshit, but that's okay. So that's the part that bothers me. The people that I served with that I know are good people that understand democracy, and they understand they may be conservative as hell, but I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
If they're fiscally conservative. Now they're not even fiscally conservative. They don't care about what's going on internationally. And if they do, they're not making their voices heard. And you continue to see the three branches of government being eroded to the point where there's only one branch. And that brings us to your book, which means we'll be in an autocratic society.
Right.
And I kind of like freedom, and I like, privacy, and I like to be able to determine my own future. I don't like Uncle Sam doing that shit.
Yes.
Totally. And so it's got me not a little distressed. It's got me a lot distressed. And I'm telling you, I'm not the only one. You probably are there. And I've got some of my relatives are there. Some others of my relatives think this guy's the best thing since Jesus Christ himself.
Yes.
Crazy.
Well,
I have some of those relatives too, just so you know. Yes.
I think you're right, Ambassador McFaul. I mean, we are seeing cracks in that fealty a little bit on certain issues. Certainly, we've seen some lawmakers question, for instance, the alleged drug boat strikes in the Caribbean, some of these things. But when you think about Trump 1.0, there were people in that administration who served somewhat as guardrails. And it seems like those people are gone. And anybody who continues to try to put up those guardrails, they're out the door, they're fired. And you bring up, you bring up the national security strategy. And Olivia Troy, who worked in the Trump administration, she wrote about this week, and she basically said that this stunned her. And she talked about how migration is now the top security threat, not Russia or China, and that this new NSS doesn't even mention the great power competition, which you talk so much about in your book. And she wrote, if you're Vladimir Putin, you're reading this with a smile. And so, you know, I'm wondering where are these folks now? Why aren't they saying anything about that? I mean, our national security strategy is pretty important.
You know, that's a great question. So first, I helped to write President Obama's first national security strategy. I remember that process. And they are important documents in terms of guiding the government. Probably not as important as everybody thinks, because the process is really an interagency process that dukes it out in terms of policies. But there's a couple of problems with the current Trump team that you alluded to, and I want to amplify. So first, the Trump administration's first national security strategy back in 2017 was just radically different than this. It was written, you know, back then the national security advisor was H.R. McMaster, General H.R. McMaster. He's now at the Hoover Institution here at Stanford with me. I know H.R. well. We don't agree on everything, but on that piece, I think he was right in identifying China and Russia as the main threats to America. This document doesn't do that. And that just shows you that individuals in the government do matter, because you're absolutely right. There are no generals. All those generals they used to have. General Mattis, also here at the Hoover Institution, not there. General Kelly, also not there. And a different group of people wrote this one. That's the first thing. Second, the constraints on executive power, which was the animating idea behind our Constitution, by the way, right? We didn't want more kings. We wanted to constrain the power of the executive. There's checks and balances in a more informal way within the interagency process for formulating national security strategy. That is also radically weakened today. The symbolism of it is we have the same guy who's the national security advisor, who's the Secretary of State, Senator Marco Rubio.
Right.
That's just insane. That doesn't allow for a debate. As far as I can tell, for what I hear, there's no policy debate at all. It's just four people writing it. And then let's get to Secretary Rubio. Again, Senator Rubio a lot better than I do. But I used to know Senator Rubio. In fact, he was on my confirmation hearings when I became ambassador. In fact, I'll tell you a little story about that, because we're talking about senators with senators. So my two kids came to that hearing, little guys at the time, right? And it was a long hearing, 4 hours or so, talking about this is 2011. At the end of it, they didn't know who Democrats and Republicans were, right? They're just and I asked them, which senator did you like? And they both said immediately, that Rubio guy. And I was like, why? And he said, because he agreed with you, Daddy, and he was a nice guy. And then I asked them, I hope the senator, not this senator, the other senator won't mind me telling him. I asked them who they didn't like. They both said Senator Menendez. And that was kind of surprising to me. He said he was too mean. But put that aside. He was a little tough on me. Just they were reacting to the interaction with their dad, right? But I tell you that story because he could be one of those guardrail guys. Again, Senator Tester, you know him a lot better than I do. I know what he used to believe, but I think because he just wants to be president, he's just decided, I'm going to check my values at the door and play this inside game. But I don't see it working because the national security strategy that was drafted had all of this stuff that echoed the vice president, another senator's speech at the Munich Security Conference. I was at that conference when he came to Munich, the brand new administration, to talk to all of our allies. And he said the same thing. He said the real threat to Europe is not China, not Russia. It's democratic erosion inside Europe. And think about the audacity of making that claim, given all of the struggles we have here at home. And the room was just in shock. It was just complete shock. It's like, what is going on here? And that's exactly how our European allies feel about this new national security strategy. They just can't believe it, that we are making them the enemy, focusing on their problems and China and Russia are just kind of footnotes along the way. That's the bad news. The good news is I don't think this document determines even the Trump administration's policy. And the good news is that he's at 38% or whatever, and hopefully, there'll be a legislature, a Congress that begins to do their job. I agree completely. This reminds me of the Putin era, where their parliament just became a rubber stamp for executive power. Yep. That's not the way the Constitution is designed to work. But hopefully that'll change, and maybe 10 years from now, people will have completely forgotten about this document.
I don't think I would have to mention the fact that I think foreign policy is really, really important in this country to a guy who spent his life in foreign policy, but I think it's really important, and I think it's important we get it right, as you've talked about in your book. But the real problem here with his 38% approval is I don't think it's based off of foreign policy. I think it's based off the economy.
Yes, of course.
And I think if the economy was in different shape, his approval would go up.
Yes.
When his foreign policy is nothing short of a train wreck, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that.
Oh, go ahead, Ambassador. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Well, I agree with that. I think that's true. And I think, people like me got to get into the debate about the ideas and be more engaged. I think a mistake that my friends made, Democrats and Republicans, by the way, is we talk too much about among ourselves in Washington and New York and out here in Palo Alto. And we thought we had all the answers. And we lost a lot of the Americans on these debates. And pulling back, I mean, why should I care about Ukraine? I got my own problems here at home. And that's part of the reason I wrote this book, by the way. And the second thing I'll tell you, on a more optimistic note, I have been around the country now, and I got more stops to go. Isn't that Johnny Cash song? I've been everywhere, man.
I've been everywhere.
And I've been everywhere. I've been to Erie, Pennsylvania, Hudson, Ohio, Columbia, South Carolina, been to Texas 4 times already, Santa Fe. Like I said, I'll be in Bozeman on Monday, Boise State in January, Utah Valley University in after that. That's where Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Mm-hmm. And I got a whole bunch more places to go. Oh, I'm forgetting Pullman, Washington. Never been to Pullman, Washington until just 2 weeks ago, Washington State University. And let me tell you, there are some people. There was even one talk I did when it was in my bio, even before I'd said a word, they said I'd worked for Obama. 3 guys walked out. So, wow. I don't want to sugarcoat how polarized our society is. But that's the good news is that in most of these places, and I get, by the way, that, when I show up in Erie, Pennsylvania, there's a selection bias of who shows up and who doesn't come. But in Erie, Pennsylvania, 600 people came to my talk. Hudson, Ohio, 500 people. University of South Carolina, where I'd never been, and I was quite nervous, pretty red place, 500 people came. And afterwards, just to go on about it, it was right before Halloween. 2 young students, inspired by talking about internationalism, dressed up as Professor McFaul, 2 young women, and sent me a photo. They had their tie on with my book. And I tell you that anecdote because everywhere I go, not everybody agrees, but I'm pretty inspired by people want to engage in this stuff. And the applause lines are always when I talk about American values. There's this cynicism with the Trump folks, right? It's all about money. It's mostly about their money, by the way. And we're just going to do deals with the Russians and the Chinese. And when we say deals, it's just the people close to him. And they think that that's what Americans care about. And again, it's just anecdotes from my time on the road. But that is not what I feel when I talk about these things. I do think a lot of Americans think we're a different country. We're not like them. And if we get back to that, we'll be okay.
Do you have a couple more minutes, Ambassador? I know
Yeah,
okay. It reminds me of, for the Mansfield Center, we had Harvard professor Danielle Allen come out, and she talked about this research that basically showed fewer than a third of millennials consider it essential to live in a democracy.
Yeah.
And that was a really shocking number for me. And I think you make a good point about how we've taken things for granted, and we've taken things for granted here. And so I'm glad that you're going to these states, and I'm glad you're getting buy-in, basically. And I think that is part of this. And you talk about that is renewing democratic confidence here at home. But one of the things I do want to mention is that, this is divided into 3 parts, and the whole part about the future. I mean, the ambassador really lays out so many, it's a roadmap, and it talks about what we should be doing, what would be smart policy, avoiding war in Taiwan, and, not politicizing development aid like USAID, avoiding McCarthyism, all of these things that really lay out a roadmap. And when I told Senator Tester I wanted to ask you this question, he made fun of me, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because you did mention you have a couple of contacts still within the Trump orbit that you speak to. So I'm wondering, have you had any meaningful conversations with folks in the Trump administration about some of these ideas for how to move forward and prevent us from falling further into an autocratic state?
No.
Well, shoot. You win, Senator.
Having said that, I mean, kind of one step removed, yes. Actually,
okay.
Let me be a little more specific. Yeah, and I've met with some Trump folks, and if I mention them, I'll get them in trouble, so I won't.
No, don't do that.
Given how radioactive I am for that group. But I want to be honest about it. These are not ideas that I think I'm going to find reception there. I have 2 different audiences I'm focused on. One, I have sent this book to probably a half a dozen presidential candidates. I don't know if they're reading them, but I did that. These are people some who I know, and have discussed with a couple of them. So playing that's the short game. But the long game is more important to me. The long game about this debate, this is a talk I could give for the rest of my career around the country, so that the pressure comes from below for why we should do these things, and not just from elites from above, and then just say, you folks in Montana, you just got to listen to us because we know what's right for you. We got to make the argument to the folks in Montana why this is the right strategy, so that they have a voice in these debates. And I completely get that the foreign policy is marginal for preferences about voting. It most always has been, by the way, even during the Cold War. We know that from people that study American electoral politics. But I think we have to have a new base for some of these institutions. So USAID that you mentioned, right? USAID had all kinds of problems. I've probably written 24 articles in my lifetime about how to reform USAID. I get that. But reform it, don't shut it down. The Chinese have their own version of USAID. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. They're not shutting theirs down. Same with Voice of America. Has lots of problems. I've written giant papers that I handed to the last transition, by the way, the Biden transition, about how to reform that. But don't shut it down. Russia Today, Putin's not shutting Russia Today down just because we decided we want to shut VOA down. But the reason they could do that so easily is there weren't constituents in America saying, hey, we need USAID, right? That's why those were the low-hanging fruit that they could go after, because they knew there would be no pushback. And tragically, they were right. So I want to play this longer game to try to develop awareness about why we need these instruments of soft power to preserve your security. There's a kind of moral argument I make in the book, but there's this very practical argument too. This is the way to keep us safer. It's a way to trade, what we grow in places like Montana, around the world. These things are intertwined. It's not just security versus morality, actually, these things are intertwined.
You're right, Michael. They did have a base, but we were talking about Rubio a bit ago. And I think this goes to much more than just Marco Rubio. There were people in the Senate, and a lot of them, that understood why USAID was important. A lot. And they weren't all Democrats, by the way. There was just as many Republicans. Marco was one of them, by the way. He understood that USAID was important.
Interesting.
I heard him speak in committee about it.
Wow. That's so interesting.
But by the way, you would never know it now. And I would say the same thing about, you talked about Taiwan. Maybe I'm wrong on this. We're not that far off from being similar in age. But wasn't one of the Republicans' last stands was we're not going to let China take Taiwan? That was a Republican pushed out. When I was growing up, that's one of the things Republicans stood for.
That's right.
On defense, and they worked, and we're not going to let mainland China, red China, communist China, whatever the hell you want to call them, take over Taiwan. And now it's like, who gives a shit on the Republican side of the aisle? I mean, if we got people talking about what's going on in Taiwan, I'm certainly not here. I'm not picking it up. And by the way, Maritza pays a lot of attention to that kind of stuff, so she'd forward it to me if it was being out there, okay? But it's not. It's crazy.
Well, I'm glad you brought that out, because I do spend a lot of time in the prescriptions of my book about Taiwan and how to avoid war over the island of Taiwan. That's the goal, I think, that should be paramount.
Absolutely.
But to your point on the Republicans, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, Reagan's critique of Carter, in establishing relations with the PRC. And it hasn't been a through line for a long time. It was in the first Trump national security strategy. And this is where I'm actually most worried about our security. I just was in Taiwan a few months ago. And I can tell you they're worried too. They're worried that this is because the language is changing, that there could be a temptation by Xi Jinping to try to take the island. And they're very worried about our credible commitment to deter them. And sometimes it's the absence of deterrence that leads to war, right? So the mistake we made in Europe was that we didn't give the Ukrainians enough weapons to deter a new invasion from Russia, right? Had we done more deterrence before 2022, we might have avoided that war. And I think the same thing about Taiwan. The way to avoid war is to give them weapons and to deter war. But they're very nervous about it, I can tell you. And by the way, these theaters are also intertwined. They're interrelated. The Taiwanese understand that if Ukraine falls, that emboldens Xi Jinping. I saw so many Ukrainian flags when I was in Taiwan, because in government offices, because they see how these things are intertwined, the autocrats versus the Democrats, right?
Absolutely. So I just got to ask about this, because you touched on it, but in the book, but Russia and China, they're kind of attached at the hip now. What do you see that relationship long term? And I'll just tell you what I think, and you tell me if I'm full of shit. But and that is that I think Xi Jinping is using Putin more than Putin's using Xi Jinping. And in the end, when China gets done with Russia, they'll probably be talking about making them the 51st state of China. Is that a fair assessment? You know Putin as well as anybody in the country, from my perspective. Xi Jinping, you probably know him fairly well too, or at least you know his tendencies. What's your view on that connection with China and Russia and all that?
So that's a super hard question, and I don't know Xi Jinping, though I spent years and years in this book trying to understand his motivations and intentions and talking to people around him. So that was I knew Russia pretty well. I know the Cold War. I know American foreign policy. Understanding China was why it took me 8 years to finish this book. And I'm still not sure, that I understand everything. But I think your basic framework is right. Xi Jinping has a different strategy for advancing Chinese interests than Putin. Xi Jinping doesn't want the destruction of the liberal international order. He also doesn't want to promote communism all over the world. Although I got to tell you, while I'm talking to you guys, there's this book. I'm going to forget the title of it, but it's about how the communists infiltrated, I want to say Glendive in the 1930s. You know the story, Senator?
Yes.
There's a little book published about it. I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to put it out somewhere. That in the research for this book I discovered. Anyway, back to your big question. His strategy is way more sophisticated. So he's got one foot in the old international order that we built. So, World Bank, United Nations, IMF, he's not leaving those groups. We're the ones leaving. He's not leaving. Mm-hmm. He's staying there to advance and increase Chinese interest. Then he's got another strategy where he's building his own clubs, where they're the center of it, right? Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, Belt and Road Initiative, I already mentioned. And he's doing that very effectively. And we're not doing any of that, by the way. We've completely checked out of that game. I really worry about that asymmetry. But it's not to invade countries and to have the whole thing come crashing down. And what's the evidence for that? Every time there's a vote in the United Nations, in the General Assembly, that's set to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there's 6 or 7 countries that vote with Russia. And you can guess what they are. North Korea, Nicaragua, Belarus, Iran. You know who never votes with them? China. China always abstains because they don't want to be a part of those rogue states. You know who's been voting with them recently? The United States of America. Under the Trump administration, we now vote with North Korea, Cuba, Russia, just to tell you how strange the world is. But secondly, I think in the long run, you're right. I still travel to China from time to time. I'm not sure they'll let me in after this book is now published. We'll see. But what I hear, and again, I want to say, talking to more academic types, but I meet with all their Russia specialists, right? And our lingua franca, by the way, is Russian. We speak Russian together with these Chinese. They have really thick accents. I can barely understand them. And I'm sure they say the same about my thick American accent speaking Russian. But what I hear from them, this is great. In the fight against the democratic world, we're glad to be with the Russians. But you have a few drinks, they don't respect Putin. They think he's a rogue, guy starting wars he can't win. They don't produce anything in Russia, right? They talk about that all the time. What do those guys produce that anybody wants in the world? All they can do is pump oil and gas, and then they talk about them like peasants that never grew up compared to China. And I think in the long run, there will be tension in that relationship, including on the border. Like you said, if you look at a map at night on the Chinese-Russian border, you'll see one side completely lit up with 200 million people. And then you see Siberia, no lights, in a world where Siberia, tragically, but it's going to happen, is suddenly going to become really fertile land. It's going to become much more valuable land as the earth heats up. And that pressure on that border is going to continue. I think there's tensions between these two countries in the long run.
So we've been at this for pretty close to an hour. Maritza, we could talk to this guy all day long.
I know. Well, I have so many questions.
Later. Yeah.
I know, but
I got one more question, Maritza, and I got to answer it. Then you're going to have to wrap this up.
I'm going to wrap it.
We'll keep talking. What time are you speaking in Bozeman on Monday?
Oh my goodness. Great question.
We'll put it in our article when we post this.
I'll look it up right now. I'm glad you asked.
Because I may drive down and see you.
Oh, no. You can't do that.
I'll do that with you, Senator.
What?
I'll do that with you.
I'll send you guys the slide deck. Yeah, I want to save your time.
Well, I hope it's in the morning. Okay, make it in the morning. Could you make it?
It's not in the morning.
Goddamn right. You got to have it in the morning. The morning is the best part of the day. That's when people get work done.
I agree with that. I'm not a farmer, but I do agree with that.
So we're going to put the slide deck up when we post this interview. We
Okay.
are going to also put a list of your talks, because we have
Great.
people listening from all over the country. But I am going to push back on one thing. I think that if you have any interest in this topic, buy this book. It's not just for scholars, because I have learned so much already from it, and I'm going to go back because it's really divided up into easy to understand sections, I think, and it's only going to make all of us smarter. So we want to thank former U.S. Ambassador to Russia and Montana, and Michael McFaul, for joining us here on Grounded.
And her IQ has jumped at least 30 points.
At least, and it was low before that, so that's big.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate the conversation.
You bet, Michael. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Okay, for everyone who's with us, though, don't go anywhere, because we did start with our conversation. We do have some headlines to get to. Oh, Stephen is saying it's at noon in Bozeman.
God damn it. That's tough. You know,
it's too bad the former ambassador didn't consult you on your schedule.
I know. I know. It would have been much
no
better.
Respect.
If you'd been at 9:30, it would have been great. But you know how it is.
You get no respect. It was a great chat. Like I said, we could have talked about so much. We could always talk about so much with Michael McFaul.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's.
We didn't even get into Cat Grizz much, or Grizz Cat.
Not much. I know. So if you're not in Montana, it's going to be a big weekend, because our two rivals, Montana State and University of Montana, meeting up again for the second time in what would this call it? Like the winner goes to the championship, right?
Goes to the national championship game in Nashville, Tennessee. Yep. So there will be a Montana team in the national championship game,
which is exciting. I mean, I am a Grizzly. I'm a University of Montana Grizzly. But I'm excited there's Montana representation in the national championship, no matter what. I'm going to get some hell for that, I'm sure. Let's talk about some headlines, though, and we want to welcome you folks who are watching. I know some people put some questions in the chat, and we just had so much to get to, so we didn't get to all of them. But follow along with us if you have any questions about what we're talking about. I just want to, we talked about this briefly, but it's been a devastating couple of days for news. So we had that horrific shooting at Brown, the horrific mass shooting in Australia at the Hanukkah celebration, the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner. We saw the president write briefly about the Brown shooting, nothing about Australia. And then he put this up, and I'm sure most of you have seen this by now, but this was his post yesterday about Rob Reiner. And when asked about it, doubled down, calling Reiner a deranged person. We are seeing a lot of people speaking out against this, including Republicans, a whole panel on Fox News. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to say something.
Well, I mean, we touched on this with McFaul. I just think the president of the United States has a higher responsibility than to act like a gutter alcoholic, and that's what you'd expect out of somebody who has no responsibility whatsoever, is to raise something like this. This was a family was totally devastated. They were murdered by a son who obviously had mental illness and addiction problems, and that's the response of the president of the United States. I mean, is there no respect for life here? Is there no respect for human decency? I mean, it's a small thing in the overall thing, in the overall scheme of things, with inflation being high and our international stance being diminished. But it really is. It was really low class, is my book. Really, really, really low class.
And Rob Reiner he is responsible for so many works that have defined generations, and very much a beloved American. And so sending love to all who knew and loved him, and all who didn't know him personally. I mean, a lot of people are really taking this hard. Speaking of alcoholic, though, I don't have the graphic for this made, but you did remind me that the Trump chief of staff, Susie Wiles, did this long-ranging interview with Vanity Fair, and it was published today. And she says that the president has an alcoholic's personality in it, his chief of staff.
Yeah, I should ask my daughter about that. She's a psychiatric nurse and oversees an addiction hospital. I don't know. I just don't know what. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't. I've been I just don't know. I don't know what that means. If it means they're impulsive, if it means they don't stay on topic, if it means they jump around a lot and they're hard
Erratic.
to follow, maybe it's pretty hard to deny that that's not the case. But I don't know what I really don't know what it means. I need to get my master's in psychology, just not my minor.
You have your minor though, and he's been very helpful to me in that department because
I have tried to help, although it's been futile. It's been futile.
Okay, let's talk about healthcare. There's a lot going on. So we know that no deal was reached, right, last week to try to extend these Obamacare credits, basically the subsidies, which are set to expire in just 2 weeks now. Yesterday, a bipartisan group of senators met to discuss a possible deal related to extending those subsidies. They're hoping to announce a framework this week. Even if that happens, though, it wouldn't come up for a vote until January. Meanwhile, on the House side, Republican Representative Mike Lawler left a closed-door meeting yesterday, walked out and had this to say: "This is absolute bullshit." And then he called it political malpractice to not hold a vote on trying to fix healthcare. I just can't, but like I've said, I think to you, I can't believe that we don't have more people saying, let's work together and get this done. I'm glad to see there's a group of 20 bipartisan senators.
The reason for them, Reeds, is there isn't many solutions out there, truthfully. Everybody will tell you that Obamacare was better than what we had, but it's not perfect. The next step, and there may be some in between, but the next step is single payer, and nobody wants to do that. So what are they going to do? What are they going to propose? And we've been doing this dance now for 15 years, where one side says, well, we've got to vote Obamacare down. It's no good, but has never come up with anything better. And that's the bottom line. And so Republicans don't want to put these subsidies in because they don't like Obamacare and they want to see Obamacare go away. And what's the result? Insurance premiums are going through the roof. I've said it before and I'll say it again, and it is a fact. And I think anybody that is for Obamacare will tell you this. If you come up with a healthcare policy that works, that people can afford to be able to get sick, you'll get bipartisan support for it. But nobody's brought that up. And what the Republicans did last week is not a solution. Healthcare savings accounts have been talked about for 25 years, maybe longer. And it's not a solution. It's not a solution unless you got people that are making a living wage, and then it becomes a solution. But we got too many people that are working multiple jobs, still can't afford to put food on the table, and that's a problem. And so these healthcare savings accounts, and the president can't write big enough checks from the federal government, especially if you're concerned about the national debt, to make up the difference in what these folks are going to have to pay for healthcare. No,
I have this up,
but I don't know Lawler from a bar of soap, but my guess is that's why he walked out of the meeting, was something, and these guys don't want to do anything but play politics. And like I said, I don't know the dude. I don't know him at all.
Well, he probably knows stats like this, because this is the latest KFF poll. 1 in 4 Affordable Care Act enrollees they're probably going to just forego health insurance if their premiums double. I mean, that's going to lead to.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's going
to lead to. I'll tell you what it's going to lead to. If those folks don't have insurance, they're not going to be able to pay their bills, and those costs will be transferred on everybody else that has insurance and drive their rates up even higher. And that's the problem. That's the problem with the policy on the big, beautiful bill. And I'm being generous when I call it that, on reducing Medicare, Medicaid, because it's going to be less people insured. Hospitals are going to be able to take in less money. They're going to have to transfer those unpaid costs of charity care to other people. And it's going to drive up rates for everybody else. So it just makes the problem worse and worse and worse.
All right. I have 2 more quick stories. This one, though, I know close to your heart as the former chair of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. Did I get that right? I always miss a word.
You got it right.
All right.
Good.
Okay. So this is from the Washington Post this week. They had an exclusive saying that the VA plans to basically abruptly get rid of tens of thousands of healthcare jobs. Could mean as many as 35,000 jobs, mostly doctors and nurses that are currently unfilled, but just not filling them.
Yeah. So in the first Trump administration, they wanted to privatize the VA, and they still want to privatize the VA. There's a lot of folks out there that think they should privatize the VA. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at this, the vets that I talked to when I was a U.S. Senator liked the VA healthcare. These folks have served the country. If the veterans group stand up and say privatize the VA, if the VFW and American Legion and Iraq, Afghanistan vets and Vietnam vets of America, and all those folks, there's a bunch of those groups out there that lobby for our veterans. If they stand up and say, you know what, get rid of the VA, then go ahead and do it. Those are the folks who should be driving the bus anyway, but they're not. And the administration is going to, through Secretary Collins, the head of the VA, through his leadership, they're going to destroy the VA. Because if you put these folks into the private healthcare system, and as we talked about earlier, there's going to be a lot of rural hospitals that close down. A lot of these vets live in rural America. For example, Montana, which is all rural, has the second highest per capita of veterans in the nation. Those rural hospitals close down. There's nothing in the private sector that's going to be able to give them health care. And the other thing I would say is this: for those folks that are like your blind veterans groups, the folks that have lost limbs, the VA is their only hope. And these folks are looking to gut it and destroy it, take away people's ability to get good health care from the VA. That's what this is about. And I don't use the VA because I'm not a veteran, believe it or not. So this doesn't impact me, but I think it impacts security of this country in a big, big way when we have an all-volunteer military and the young people are looking at this going, this is how we're going to treat the people who serve this country. I'm not signing up. And for that reason, and a lot of other reasons that we talked to with McFaul, I think we can look forward to a draft in the near future.
I know that was on my list to talk to him about, because on 60 Minutes on Sunday, there was a whole story about Germany's military and that they're really considering the potential need for another draft because people don't want to sign up. Yep.
Well, you got to treat them right because they serve in conditions that are horrible and far different than in this country. And, you know, I spent a little time in Afghanistan, and that place is, I wouldn't call it cool. Let's just put it that way. It's not a place I'd like to go to. And it's a whole lot different than anywhere in this country, including Montana. But those folks go over there, they serve, they put their lives on the line, they come back home to see their health care undermined and hollowed out. Not cool.
Well, our last headline that I wanted to end on, we probably could have had Mike McFaul stay around for this one. This is a story that no fewer than 10 people have sent me this story. This was in Politico. And it basically is on the ground reporting from both Marion, Montana, and up the Blackfoot River corridor. And the headline is, "I didn't vote for this." It basically talks about how all of these Doge cuts have impacted the way of life out west, specifically in Montana for this story, from gutting Forest Service departments that, employees that take care of our public lands, to firefighters, to funding programs that help with irrigation efforts. So this was an interesting read for so many people who asked both of us, what are people saying out in Montana?
Well, and I will tell you, Marion, Montana is probably one of the reddest parts of the state of Montana. It's very Republican. And right now, we're getting weather right now that's taking all the snow out of the mountains and putting it down the rivers because we got unbelievably warm temperatures for the middle of December and rain on top of it. So we're seeing a lot of flooding in places in northwestern Montana. If that snow isn't replaced over the next 2 to 3 months, this is going to be a hell of a fire season. And all those Doge cuts to the folks who take care of our public land and the firefighters. And by the way, all three of these things they mentioned, and irrigation, because there won't be the water there to irrigate, and it will require management to have that water there to irrigate, will come home to roost. Those chickens will come home to roost, and it won't be good for the United States of America, and certainly won't be good for those regions of the country that are impacted. But you know, it'll give legs to people like Senator Lee, who says, you know, we need to sell our public lands. And when they're on fire and they're not managed correctly, it gives people like him to say that with some credence, when in fact it's a problem that's been created because of bad management.
Yeah, that could be a whole episode. I did a very in-depth couple of stories about that, about our management.
When you were in the news media,
Yeah.
before they laid you off, before they canned you.
Yeah, before that, like how you were on the VA, you were the VA chair before they canned you.
Before I got fired. Exactly right. I mean, you got to accept it for what it is. I mean, people didn't like the job I was doing, so they said, "Get the hell out." So I'm out. I'm happy about that.
I don't think everyone's happy about that. We get a lot of comments that people wish you were still there, Senator.
I love them too.
Okay, so we've gone on a long time, an hour and 10 minutes here, but it's been a great conversation. We want to thank everybody who has added in. I see all the comments, and we thank you for joining us in this conversation. We have to ask Senator Tester about his hat before we go. I can't see it. My screen is small. It's the state of Montana Flour and Grains.
Yeah, it's a little company in Fort Benton, Montana that buys grain and ships it out. Sometimes it's in 25 kilogram bags. Sometimes it's in bulk bags that hold about 2,500 pounds, and then sometimes it's in train cars. So it's a good little plant. It's a good little family-run organization that employs quite a few people for the amount of grain they move, and it's one of those manufacturing companies in Montana and in the United States where we need more of to put more competition in the marketplace.
All right, less consolidation. We are going to talk about that in our next episode. We're going to talk all about food costs, food inflation, what's causing this, what we can do, the challenges, the problems. Did I miss anything?
No, it'll be good though. We got a guy by the name of Scott Faber who's coming on, and hopefully he will put forth some information that will make us all smarter, just like McFaul did today.
Oh, McFaul always makes me, McFaul he can make me feel smarter and also dumber at the same time. It's a gift.
He's one of those guys. I'm telling you, he's a good dude. I've met him several times in person, and he's a good dude. But I'm jealous when people have convolutions leaking out their ears because they got so much smarts. He's one of those guys that's really smart.
I don't know how I can't keep track of a news headline without getting one of the details wrong if I don't write it down. I don't know how he keeps all that straight, but we are so grateful to him. We want to thank him for joining us again for the second time. We want to thank our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can send us an email at groundedpcast@gmail.com. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it all. You got the full load.
All right. We want to thank everybody for being part of this community with us, and we'll chat again soon.
Tally ho.